All right. If you're joining, thank you for joining. If you're watching this later, I don't thank you for joining because you didn't join. All right. So from last week, we got started on aliases and firewall rules. From a security perspective, this is kind of the base or core component to making sure that when you set up a firewall that has some of this complexity to it. Oh, I still get the music going. Sorry about that. When you set up a firewall that has this kind of complexity, it's very easy to create a rule that opens your network to potential vulnerability. So we're going to spend a little time making sure that we kind of learn, and I need to learn a few things too, but we need to learn how what we do in our firewall rules affects the traffic flow, whether we're blocking the right things or allowing the right things to the right places, and kind of making sure that what we're intending to do is actually implemented in the firewall configuration. So we will continue with the alias setup because the aliases are going to help you more easily understand and manage your firewall rules so that we don't make mistakes and kind of, instead of protecting our network, open it up to all sorts of bad things. So let me get the right thing up here. And Roxanne, if you can just let me know if the audio volume is good, that'd be great. All right, so we're back here on our design, and we're going to focus on building out the alias list. And so let's start with our guest access, since these are kind of standard alias or standard services that we're going to be allowing on the guest network. So regular web browsing, that consists of a couple of ports here. So if we come here to the IANA Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, this is the body that kind of assigns certain types of traffic to certain ports and keeps a database of the well-known ports. And it's a very good resource, something you'll want to bookmark. Let me zoom in a little bit. That's kind of small. Sorry about that. And they have a nice little search here. And so I'm going to just search for HTTP. And that's the common web protocol. And it gives us back a list of kind of some of the standard ports. So we have the protocol of TCP. Port 80 is our standard HTTP port. And that's it for HTTP. Now there are other ports that are common. So HTTPS, which is encrypted web traffic. And we'll get the assigned port. So this has a few of them. We've got all sorts of actually types. The one we're going to focus on at the moment is 443. That's one of the standard ports for 443, or for for HTTPS 443. Okay. Now in most firewalls, I don't know why that happened. Let's come back here let's go to demo deb here and get logged back in to the firewall. Most firewalls, and OPNSense is no different, has a list of standard aliases kind of built into it. So let's do a quick check. We're going to come here to firewall, and we're going to go to aliases. Now, a lot of the standard ones probably aren't going to be listed, but let's do a search anyway. So HTTP, yeah, it's not listed. However, if we go to add, now let's say we want to say, let's say we want to add a group of ports, so that when we create a rule, we can say, you know, I don't want to have to add individual rules every time I want to allow HTTP and HTTPS. What I can do is I can create an alias that includes both of those ports, and then I can generate a single rule that allows both of those ports out or in or whatever we're trying to do. So what we're going to do here is let's go ahead and add another alias. We're going to call this common web ports. Or how did we put it in our regular web browsing? That's a dumb name. We'll just call it common web ports. And from a naming convention, I advise, in fact, I don't think it lets you use spaces. Let's see. Yeah, you can't have spaces. So make sure you're naming your whatever naming convention you come up with. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to start with web. When you're coming up with your naming conventions, some of the things to think about are like if I'm going to have multiple groups or multiple ports, visually being able to pick them out in a long list, kind of it depends on how you name them. So we're going to do web. We're going to call this web standard because we might have another group that's like web non-standard, for example. Okay, and this one is going to be a type of ports, multiple. We don't have any categories, but let's see if HTTP is a standard one. It is not. Okay, so we've got to add it. In fact, let's do that. We're going to call this web HTTP, and this is going to be port 80. Standard HTTP protocol. Okay, let's add another one. We're going to call this web HTTPS. And this was our 443. Standard. Okay. Now let's create another alias. So we have web, HTTP, and HTTPS. And now let's add one called web standard ports. Oops. We'll just call it web standard. This is also ports. And this time we can add our we should be able to. Why is that not working? Let's see. Oh, it's because we called it web, not HTTP. Web, HTTP, and web. All standard web ports. Okay. All right. So from a strategy standpoint, now we might have actually non-standard ports. So for example, let's add one that is you'll typically see. We'll call this web HTTP, and then here we'll name it, and then we'll add it to another group. So this is also a port, and port 8080 is another one you might use for certain administrative things. Okay, let's save. And actually, let me change that again. Sorry. Web non-standard HTTP. Okay, and another one you might see is HTTPS port would be 8443, for example. So we'll do web non-standard HTTPS 8443. All right. And again, the naming convention can be whatever you want because you're going to be managing it. It just has to make sense to you. Okay. Now, if I had a really long list, the naming convention comes in handy because I could just type web, for example, and it gives me all of the ones that I've defined before. Or if I wanted to find all the HTTPS ports that I have, I can pull them up. And it's pulling the web standard because we included HTTPS in it. Okay, so now let's also create an alias, a host alias. Okay, and we're gonna call this Google. It's a host, and we're going to put www.google.com. Okay, and what the system is going to do is going to go out and it's going to do a DNS query to find out what the IP addresses are for google.com, and it'll do that periodically and update it for us. And then we'll just call this google.com alias. All right, and let's see. What other ports did we have here? We had email services, okay. So standard email services, we have SMTP. We've got a service issue here. SMTP is port 25. We have IMAP. Ooh, something wrong with their website. So 143 and 993. Let's see. I wonder what they call. So SMTP has a secure. So let's do 587 as a standard SMTP port submission protocol. Okay. Mail submission protocol. So we're going to add 25. We're going to add for SMTP. We're going to add 587 for secure SMTP. Then we're going to add IMAP and secure IMAP. Okay. So let's come back here to our firewall. And now the other way I could do this, if I didn't want to have, if I didn't want to have individual ports or individual port entries, I could add them all in the same one. And I'm going to do that for time's sake here. Email services, we'll call it. Standard. All right. So let's just, I don't think that would work actually. So we're going to do port 25 for SMTP, port 587 for secure SMTP, 993, and then 143, was it? 1 second. Yeah, 143. Okay. All right. Now there are a couple other, there's like POP, which I don't know, most people don't use POP. A lot of your Exchange, like online stuff, is going to go over HTTPS, so we already have that. All right, so let's save that. Okay, so in this case, what we did, instead of breaking each of these out into their own and then adding those to this group, we just, for purposes of time, we added them all in the same one. So you can do that as well. Okay, now, let's come back here. We've got VPNs. We'll come back to that. All right, that's enough for now. So you get the idea. You can use this tool here to look up various service ports if you don't already know them. Like if you're trying to figure out what a certain service has or uses for its port and its protocol. Now, you notice in the definition of the ports, we're not actually specifying the protocol, and that's whether it's TCP or UDP. We're just specifying the port. The protocol is done at the rule level. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All we care about in this step is finding out the detail for the port. All right, and then let's see. See if there's anything in. Now, restricting a set of known vulnerable ports, okay? We have that as one of our, because in the LAN, now I'm moving over to the LAN. So, sorry, jumping around. It's my brain. It's Friday. Got up early. So on the guest network, we're blocking things first and then allowing things, okay? Or I'm sorry, we're allowing things first and then blocking everything else. So as a guest tries to get out to the internet, they're going to say, hey, I want to go to this website. And we're going to say, okay, as long as it's on protocol HTTP or HTTPS, aka port 80 or port 443, we will allow it. If it's an email service within those defined ports, we will allow it. And then as the traffic goes out, if it doesn't match, it goes to the next rule. If that doesn't hit, it goes to the next rule. If that doesn't hit, it goes to the next rule, until it gets to our block rule, is kind of our default block rule. And so if it's not defined in the allow section, it'll get blocked automatically. So there we're saying basically, here are the things you can do and everything else you can't. In our LAN, we're kind of taking the opposite approach, where we're saying you can do everything except for these, okay? And so the way that that works is we have a default allow rule, and then above that we're going to put the things it can't do, okay? So if it's trying to get out to, out to, let's say, I don't know what, so let's say we want to restrict SSH, for example, outbound. I don't know why we would do that, but let's just say we want to say only SSH allowed to certain things, and we want to block it if it's not to one of those ports. What we would do is we'd create a rule, put that at the top, and then if it evaluates, if it hits, meaning if it matches the condition, so it's outbound, it's going to this port, and it's not on the allow list, then block it. Then once it hits a rule, so this is the other thing about firewalls, once it matches something, it stops processing the rest of the rules because it's already matched. If it doesn't match, then it goes to the next rule. So that's kind of the logic here. All right. Now let's go back to our configuration. So as you're building out your port list and your aliases, you want to try to, well, what I'll do is I have a kind of a comprehensive list of ports that we can publish, and I'll put that in a particular format. And let's actually talk about that real quick. The other thing that you can do, I think, in most firewalls is we can export our alias list. So I'm going to go ahead and download this. And it puts it out in a JSON format. Don't be scared if you're not familiar. JSON is kind of, it's a text-based sort of database type of file. It's a very structured file. And the nice thing about it is you can use it to sort of predefine and then import your aliases. And this is the structure that it takes. So you have your alias, okay, aliases. And then each alias, as you add them, they get a unique ID, and then they contain these particular attributes in this format. So is it enabled? What's its name? What type is it? So here's a host type, and we have a host of demo dev IP address. Here's a port type, one of the ones that we created, called standard HTTP, etc. So basically what we could do is we could copy these. Let's go down. Okay, here's the example of our SMTP services, or our email services, sorry, includes SMTP. So you get the idea. So what you can do is you can actually use this to kind of create a list offline and then import it, which is what we'll do. We'll publish a list of standard ports that we use in our firewall configurations. That way you can import sort of a comprehensive list and start using the aliases without having to set it up. And if you know of anybody that's watching, if you know of any lists out there that people can use, drop them in the comments. That would be great. Okay. All right. So now that we have a couple of the things in place, and we're moving along here, let's jump into the rules and kind of configure a few rules so we can get a feel for how this works. So let's see. We want to do, let's come to our, this is demo dev. So right now, let me log into demo Dan here. All right. Sorry for the dead air, folks. Okay. Right now, if you recall, Demo Dan can't really do much because he's on, can't go to Google. Can we ping demo deb? No, can't do that. All right, so let's see real quick. Sorry, I don't remember from last week. Let's find out. Demo Dan is currently on the guest network. Okay, so that's good. That's the one we're working with. And Demo Dan can't go to Google, can't really do much. So let's come into our firewall rules and let's go to our guest network. Okay. Now, right now, okay, that's right. We did a ping rule to demonstrate how the rules work. So we're allowing ping to demo deb. We weren't allowing anything else. Now, the reason he can't look demo deb up is because we don't have DNS as an alias. In fact, that's another alias we should add. But if we were to ping 192.168.20.51, we can ping it by its IP address. We just can't look up the name. Okay, now, so actually what we need, we need to add another alias real quick, sorry. Oh, Nate, an ounce of planning goes a long way. Okay, so we know DNS is a standard, we'll just add this as real quick. Port, DNS is port 53. And it's UDP, okay? All right, so what we're gonna do here is there are a couple ways to add this rule. So let's first, let's go back to our guest. Let's add a rule. And on the guest interface coming in, we're gonna allow UDP from any source. Well, okay, so on the guest, we could restrict this to just the guest net, which we should probably do. So we're going to restrict it only anything on the guest network will be evaluated with this rule. Otherwise, it'll be blocked. And the source port we don't care about in this case. So the source port is when an endpoint goes out. So when an endpoint is trying to communicate outward, the destination it's going to is, like, for example, in DNS is going to be port 53. The port that the endpoint that's communicating outward is using is random and is determined by the operating system, and it just picks a random port. Okay, so we don't really care about the source port because it could be anything, and we don't want to restrict what port the the computer is going to use on its end for the communication. What we do care about, though, is the destination port. So here, oh no, the destination is going to be guest. Okay, if you're actually, we don't want to restrict this because the guest can use any DNS server, whatever it's configured. And if I recall, the network is handing out the internal one and some Google. Okay, we care about the destination port range. Okay, so let's go back. Man, that was confusing. I apologize. So we're going to pass traffic coming into the guest interface. Here we can use both IPv4 and IPv6. That way, in the future, when we enable IPv6, this rule will apply. We're gonna look at the UDP protocol. Okay, it has to come from the guest network. So anything on this IPA.50 network. Okay, we don't care about the source port, and we don't care where it's going, but it's got to evaluate to port 53. Okay, And so we'll just say allow DNS, allow DNS. That's good enough. Okay, let's save. We're going to apply. Now let's come back to here and let's ping demo deb again. So this time we get a response that demo deb is at 2051, and that's because we just told the firewall to allow DNS out, or in, technically, into this guest interface. Okay. Now, if I go to ping, so I should be able to look up Google, right? And let's look up www.google.com. Okay, so I can look up Google. Now, can I ping Google? What do you think the answer is? Anybody want to guess? I can't. And the reason I can't is because the firewall is still blocking everything. Remember, if it's not the LAN, if it's a different segment like guest or we have IoT or server, by default it blocks everything. If we expand this automatically generated rule, we have right here this first rule, which is a last match rule. It's blocking everything from everywhere. Okay. And what we're doing now is we're trying to create a list, a secure list of things that we want to allow out of the network. And so right now we cannot reach, or we can't go out to Google, okay? Because there's not a rule that allows us, that overrides that default block. So let's create one. And we're going to use the alias that we created before. So I'm going to hit add. Okay. Now here we can determine, okay, well, what do we want to allow out, right? So we could allow ping, but not HTTP. We could allow HTTP, but not ping. But let's just start with ping, since that's the thing that we're using to test with. So here we've got pass guest coming into the interface. We want to allow ICMP, okay, from any source. Well, actually, we want to do our guest net again. And this time, we're going to allow it to our alias called Google. Okay. And we'll just put allow ping. Allow ping to Google. All right. And we'll make it always available. Let's get we'll apply changes. And once I apply this, we should see responses now. There we go. So now on our network, on our guest network, we can actually ping Google. So next question, can we browse Google yet? Probably a rhetorical question. And if you guess no, then you're correct. Okay. So let's add another rule. And this time we're going to allow on the guest interface coming into that interface. So just to recap, this was confusing for me when I was first learning firewalls. You want to look at these rules from the perspective of the firewall itself, not like here, you know, the initial, at least the way that I was thinking about it initially, was thinking it from the perspective of the computer I was using. So I want to go out of the computer, outbound to the internet, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, I need a rule that's outbound from my machine out to the internet. And that's the wrong way to think about it, because the way the firewall is operating is it's blocking traffic coming in and out of the interface. So if we want to get out to the internet, to Google, we first have to go from this machine into the firewall. Okay, and so that's why you're doing a rule that says allow traffic coming into this interface here. All right, protocol in this case is TCP. And again, you'll get that from here, from our, so if we do port 80, there is UDP traffic, but for now we're going to use our standard as TCP. And We don't want to allow it to everywhere. Remember, we're going to restrict this rule to our guest net. And the destination is Google. Oops, our alias that we created. And the port right now we want web. This is why your naming convention matters, because when you're searching in the interface, we want all the standard web standard ports. So that would include both HTTP and HTTPS. And so we're going to allow web to Google. All right. Okay, now if we come back here, oops, sorry, got to apply that. Now if we come back here, we can get to Google. Okay, great. So that's working. So we're building our list. Now, what if we didn't, like, this is kind of silly, kind of redundant, but the idea here is, you know, you can restrict, you can control pretty granularly what's allowed in and out and where to, and that kind of thing, which is something that you'll want to think about, because when you get into things like blocking based on URLs and blacklisting known bad websites and that kind of stuff, you'll be creating aliases that include maybe a list. You'll also be you'll be using services that kind of do the same thing but automatically for you. But if you wanted to control that, for example, let's say, not that you would want to do this, but let's say you had a list of IPs of networks that you weren't too fond of, and you wanted to block them from ever coming in or out of your network. You can do that, and this is the way you would do that. Otherwise, you have to depend on the service that you're using to accomplish the same task. All right, so I don't know if there's any questions. I see a few people watching, but that's kind of the basics. Now, we could do things like we could combine these rules and only have a single rule, but hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea of how to control traffic coming in and out of the network. So now if we were to go to some other website like staple.io, we won't be able to. Okay. So what we could do is, in our aliases list, we could create an alias. Let's create one more host alias. I think you can do star.staple.io. We'll see. Okay. Nope, you cannot. There's a way to do it. Let's check the documentation, actually. Let's go to docs. This is another thing. Their documentation is very good, and so let's see. I wanted to know, can we do wildcards? Single host, fully qualified. I'm not sure how that applies. Let's do a test. So we're gonna do staple.io, okay, and we'll just do staple, and then we'll see if let's apply that, and then we'll add another one called allowed websites. And we're going to add our staple and Google. Okay. Oops. Can't have spaces. All right, let's save that. Apply. All right, now let's come back to our rules and we'll go to our guest network since that's the one we're going to be using. And we're going to change this. So we're going to change this. So instead of just Google, we're going to do allowed websites. Okay. And let's update this to allowed web. Okay. Save. Apply. All right, now we should be able to get here in a second. Let me refresh this. Okay, we can get to staple. Good. Very slowly, mind you, for some reason. Oh, okay. So what's happening here is staple has a few things that refers to other sites. See, it's using a Google font, and so it can't get to that, right? So it's not loading. Let's go to share. Okay, now that works. All right. So what I did here is I just wanted to know if I only add the top level domain, so this portion of the website as a host, or this portion of the host, fully qualified domain name, as an alias, will it include anything that is what's called a subdomain or subhost of that top level domain? The answer is yes. Okay, good. Well, I guess I learned something. All right, back to our firewall. Let's get rid of this. We don't need that. Yes, apply. Okay, so this is shaping up nicely. Let's come back to our rules. So allow other most ports, but inspecting traffic that comes in and out. Okay, so this this third rule here, allow other most ports. Allow most ports, but inspect traffic that comes in and out. So that gets into what's called intrusion detection. Okay, so we'll do that later on in our series here. So let's go to the internal network and let's create our restrictive rules. We don't have time, 10:48. Okay, So let's do this. Let's add, let's go back to our aliases. Let's add, port 25 as its own. SMTP is one. Call this email. SMTP standard. All right. Sorry, I should have done this before. So we're gonna add port 25. Now, usually, if you're hosting email internally to your network, you might want to allow this, but block it if it leaves the network, right? Or only allow that to come from certain endpoints, like the server that is running the mail server, for example. But if you have if you have a device come into your network and it's compromised and it starts sending out spam, that can get you in a little bit of trouble. So something like SMTP, we want to control that. We don't want to just allow that kind of traffic, because then your network could get blacklisted, or people could get spam and then have their stuff stolen, and then they find out it came from your network and they come and sue you or something like that. So we want to make sure that the things that we know probably shouldn't be happening on our network aren't. Okay. Now, so let's use SMTP as our example here. And let me think about a good way to test this here. Okay, so right now, if I were to telnet on here, oh, yes, okay. So if I were to telnet to mail.staple.io, on port 25 from this network, I can get there. See that? Connected to mail on port 25, and it shows me that I am connected to postfix, right? Now, it's not an open relay, so I wouldn't be able to control. Okay. Let's exit out of telnet. Quit. Thank you. All right. So right now, I just proved that I can get to this mail server over port 25 SMTP. What we want to do is we want to block that. So how do we do that in our LAN network, which by default allows anything? Let's come here to our LAN network. And okay, so right now you have default allow LAN to anything on both IPv4 and 6. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a rule. And this time we're going to block coming into the interface. So from my computer into the firewall. We're going to do both IPv6 and this is going to be TCP. Actually, we're going to do both. And so in other words, if it's port 25, either UDP or TCP, block it. So source, right now we'll just do any because on our LAN, we're not going to allow any SMTP from any device on our LAN. So whatever it is, we're just going to block it coming into this interface, okay? Destination, we don't care. This is where we want SMTP. Okay. So disallow SMTP from LAN. Okay, save that, apply. Okay, now the other thing I need to do is if I were to leave this just like this, and let's do that just to show you, okay? If I leave this rule at the end here, what's going to happen is this rule will hit first, okay? So remember, it evaluates these first match rules. It starts at the top and says, okay, does this match? Okay, in the case of a test for SMTP, since this rule says, well, sure, allow anything, everything is going to match, okay? So if I were to do this again, telnet, see, I can get there, okay? So let's control quit. So what we want to do in our rule is we want to make sure that this rule here is above this rule. And the way we do that is we select this rule, and then we go to the top rule and we say, move selected rules before this rule, okay? And now we'll hit apply. Okay, now, because this rule is going to hit first, it'll match, and therefore we should be blocked from connecting over port 25 to this server. And we can't connect because the traffic is being blocked. And if we were to come to our firewall here, oops, oh, this one, all right, sorry. Too many windows open here. If we were to come to firewall, go to log files, and then go to live view, okay? We can see, and then we say, okay, destination port is 25. And click the plus sign. Oh, it probably stopped. Let me do that again. All right, let's come back here. Action blocked. Well, we should see. Let's come back here. We don't have time. Why is that not hitting? Let's see. LAN, TCP, UDP. It's applied. We know it's getting blocked. Why isn't our firewall showing us? Let's see. Anybody have an idea on that? But it's still watching. If anybody's watching. All right, let's come back here. Action. Destination port contains 25. It could be that it's just taking a second to show up in the log, but I mean, we know it's being blocked, obviously. All right, I'm not going to dwell on the live view log issue. But so this is how you would block certain things. So let's do this. Let's add another rule just to drive the point home here. In our rules on our LAN, we're blocking SMTP, and because I think Google is evil. I love you, Google. Thanks for letting us use your YouTube platform, but you're still evil. We're going to block on the LAN. We're going to block access to Google. So we have our alias. We're going to do any IPv6, any protocol. We're just going to block everything to Google. Destination is Google. All right. Let's hit save. Apply. Okay, now we need to move this. So we're going to check this, and we'll move it right well, we can move it right above this rule. Okay. All right. Apply changes. So this rule is any IP, any network type, any source, any protocol. Excuse me. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Any protocol going to Google. All right. So now if I come here, oops. Actually, that's the web browser. And I try to go to Google, I can still go to Google. Why is that? Let's see. Let's see what's going on here. So this rule should block anything going to Google. It's possible this is just a cached. Let's open a different browser. That's probably a cached website. LibreOffice Empress Conqueror. All right, can I get to Google? Answer should be no. Okay, so that's working. Scared myself there. All right, the reason that was loading in Firefox here is because it's cached. But if I were to go to, like, say, what's Google's email? Gmail? Oh, no, it's letting me out. Why is it letting me out? Very interesting. Well, that's something I'll have to investigate. I don't know why that's letting me out. That should not be letting me out. Let's see if this is using some sort of settings. Aha. Ah, good old. Let's see. Oh, you know why that's letting me do that? Because we did www.google. Ah, silly Wabbit Twix are for kids. Okay, let's go change that. That's what happens when you don't practice. Any questions? It's like people coming and going. That's fine. I think that's about all we wanted to show today anyway. So let's play around a little bit. So let's come back to our alias. Let's find Google. And we're going to edit this. And instead of www.google, we're just going to say anything google.com. All right, save, apply. Now, oops, let's go to, what was it, meet.google? There we go. Now it's blocking. Okay, so make sure when you create your rules, that's a good example. Like I created this before I realized that just adding the top level domain would block everything underneath it. So it kind of it treats it as a wildcard. So anything .google.com is going to be blocked in this case. All right. I think that's it. I don't know if anybody still watching has any questions or any thoughts, any suggestions on aliases and firewall rules, or we have a few minutes here. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and end the stream early. Let's wait a minute. Roxanne, you have any questions? You know, the other thing, I guess I can talk a little bit about sort of philosophy at the moment. When I think about how I communicate this, I always think about certain people in my life that aren't too technical, and but that understand the value of privacy and freedom and liberty, and how this technological age plays directly into the degree to which we have agency in the world. And because everything that we rely on, our businesses, our friends, our job, how we make money, etc., it kind of all nowadays revolves around this almighty technology that humanity has created, which has brought a lot of good to the world for sure. Lifted a lot of people out of poverty, and it has done some very good things for the vast majority of people. And so, from that perspective, it's a wonderful thing. The challenge we're faced with these days is that because it's such a beneficial thing, and it has so much power over us and kind of determines to a great degree, as much as we let it, whether or not we have the ability to act in this world, or have agency, or make decisions or choices, or make a living. I don't know why my eyes are watering. My apologies. We have to take back control of it, because if the control of the technology is not in our hands, in other words, it's all centralized with large tech companies or something like that, and we are dependent on them for knowing how to run it, how to deploy things, how to configure things, these concepts that are pretty essential to understanding and being able to regain control over the technological capability, we are going to be setting ourselves up for a lot of problems in the near future, is my belief. And this might be where it gets into some philosophical sort of debates or arguments or difference of opinion on where the role of, you know, these kinds of things in our life come into play, right? So if I don't learn these, this is how I think about it. And this is how, like, for example, I think of my mother, who's a business owner, very hardworking, extremely talented. She's a creative type. She's not technical. And so what I try to do when I think about deploying these, or learning these kind of complex concepts, is keep in mind why I'm doing it, because it is going to be difficult at first, but I have to be motivated by something. And for me, knowing technology and being able to configure these things plays directly into the degree to which I have agency in this world. And so hopefully by going through some of this stuff in detail, we can kind of help one another bring some of that agency back into our hands. And so that's the reason we're doing this, again, just to kind of reiterate. Scrat, you can, sorry this is so early. It's recorded, so you can watch it later, but hopefully, I think I'll end it there. That's enough philosophizing for a tech guy. Plus my eyes are watering like crazy. So I want to thank the folks who joined for watching and staying with us. Yeah, a lot of people are self-hosting. Keep up the good work, my friend. It is. There's a movement afoot, and I think it's a wonderful thing, and I think people are helping people. There's some really good channels out there to help you learn these things. And I try to find something that isn't necessarily rehashing other stuff you can find on the internet, but I think a lot of the big guys, they kind of gloss over this level of detail and really getting into explaining some of the base concepts. And they assume a lot about what you're supposed to know and that kind of stuff. So hopefully this approach is helpful for you. I know it's kind of long and drawn out, and there's a lot of detail and a lot of Nate fumbling around trying to figure out how to explain things, or even learning. And like the alias thing today, that was something new that I won't forget. So anyway, I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll join us next week. We'll probably get into some of the more, now that we've got the rules, I'll try to get this set up so that we can move on to some of the other concepts here. But keep an eye out for our post on what we're going to talk about next. And thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week. Have a blessed weekend. Take care.